Hey Priyanka, thank you so much for joining me on the Aligned Intelligence. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much.
Can you walk us through your journey? Have a breadth of experience working in tech and becoming a coach, and you have your own podcast as well. So could you talk more about that?
Sure. Yes, of course. It's been a long journey. I have been in the tech industry for over 20 years. Started out as an engineer and then really moved into technical product and program management because I love to see things from start to end. And, that just got me and my creative juices flowing, which also leads me to the podcasting bit that I'll come to in a second here. I worked at a couple of big tech companies and then startups as well. And I got an opportunity to work with other people, grow large teams. And that's what motivated me to become an executive leadership coach to help other people gain those leadership skills that can really help change their career trajectory. And, podcasting was something that I got into late, listening to podcasts, but I really enjoyed that medium. I had been writing a lot earlier, and I just thought this was a great way to get your ideas out there, have conversations with some very interesting people. And so that's where I started my podcast, which was called the Priyanka Shinde podcast, which I do in seasons. It just gives me a sort of good way to have some conversations, take a break, and then have some new conversations based on what's going on in the tech world.
Nice. That's great to hear, Priyanka. So what made you choose the management route? You did start off as an individual contributor.
Sure. So, I feel like even before I got into management, I was working a lot with people, especially because of the role I was in, which is, technical product and program management. So very people-centric role. You're working with other teams, you're working with senior leaders, and a lot of times people who don't necessarily report into you. So I had gained some of the skills that are necessary to get into a people management role. And then I saw that as a natural progression of my work, especially because as a senior individual contributor, I had also started mentoring other people. So I was working with others who are just becoming, coming into tech or coming into specific technical or program product management roles. And so that really felt very rewarding. And I thought that this would be great. So when I started working and having a team and building out the team, I enjoyed that process, not just about how to manage a team, but really how do you scale yourself through others and drive results for your business through other people.
And what was the key moment when you were managing teams in big tech to branch out and starting your own academy called the TPM Academy? I've seen a lot about it on LinkedIn and many different forums. What made you choose that path?
I started a version of TPM Academy earlier in 2020. This was the time I moved from Facebook, where I used to work as a technical program leader, to Cruise, which was the self-driving car company. And going from a very huge company where there were a lot of support groups, I was part of mentorship groups and circles. I was part of the women's employee group, TPM groups, right? So I thought, now I'm going to a smaller company. May not always have that community with me. And so I decided to build that community online through my blog at that point. And so I would say that was like the very early formation of TPM Academy to what it is today. And then in 2022, when I left the corporate world, so to say, to start my own business and venture, TPM Academy was something that I still wanted to pursue because I felt like it was necessary to sort of share my years of experience and expertise that I had gained with other people. And so that was the motivation and how it all started.
Let's double click on your big tech experience, moving over as a technical program manager leader there to a smaller team. How does technical program management shift from big companies to smaller companies?
I would say that it shifts from big to small, especially not in the way I experienced it. That necessarily didn't happen. Though I can tell you, like, technical program management is defined very differently, not just in different companies, but even in different teams within the same company. So to give you an example, in Facebook, I worked in 2 or 3 different organizations, and every organization had a different understanding of a technical program manager and what they do. And so it wasn't necessarily about the scale of the team or how, what product it was building. So when I went from Facebook to Cruise, I, in fact, started leading a bigger team. So for me, size kind of reversed in that sense. At Facebook, I was leading a smaller team. And then at Cruise, I was leading the entire TPM organization for the autonomous software group. So I actually went from like thinking about one team to thinking about 6 to 7 different teams of TPMs. And that requires a different scale of thinking and how you grow and how you help your organization. One thing that has been common throughout this journey, be it at any startup or big tech company, is how do you continue evangelizing for the role? How do you set up the TPMs for success to ensure that the work they are doing is really valuable and acting like a force multiplier? And so that was something that I always did in any place that I worked in as an individual contributor or as a manager.
When you were leading these different teams, we always hear that golden question. A lot of members, especially engineers, they're asking, can the technical program manager be more technical? How would you approach being technical or being in the weeds with the engineer as a manager and leading teams?
Yeah, I do believe, technical is 1/3 of the title. And so it's important to be technical. Now, what does that mean? I would say there's a couple of different ways. And there is this notion of big T versus small t. So how technical are you, or how technically involved do you get? And I would say you have to be able to hold a conversation with engineering. You have to understand, not necessarily to write all the code that an engineer or like a senior architect might write, but to understand how the data, how the information flows throughout that system. So having that full understanding of the entire architecture and the system helps you become a better TPM, because you can now understand when somebody asks for a, say, product feature, or an engineer says, no, but I have to do this. And you can immediately think of, is there a dependency? Is this going to be feasible long term? What might happen with this other system that has a dependency on this particular engineer, right? And so if you don't have that understanding, then it's hard for you to think about and assess risks that might be coming along. So that's very important. Now, in addition, what is happening over the past few years is that products are getting more complex and technically more complex, especially now that we have a bunch of AI and generative AI and LLMs. You can think of like there is a lot of domain specific technical understanding that needs to come. And if you have that, then again, you can become a better TPM. So in my opinion, you don't need to make the decisions that a senior architect might make, right? So when engineering says we want them to be technical, sometimes you also hear the opposite, like, why do they need to be technical? Because like, isn't the engineer supposed to make the decisions? Which is true, right? But you can influence the decisions. That's always been my thinking, that you can influence technical decisions. You may not necessarily be the final say on it, because the engineer is there, who's obviously, that is their job. So you're not really taking away their job.
Right. Yeah, of course. And now that we are in this whole world of AI and generative AI and things like that, how is that really changing the way at least you are operating today, and how different technical program managers are from your perspective?
Yeah, let me sort of take that in 2 parts, and I'll answer the technical program management part first, because we were just talking about it. I think having this AI is a great boon for technical program managers, because here's the thing, right? A lot of times as a TPM, you get bogged down into the nitty-gritty details of something, managing the tasks, taking notes and all of those things, and creating these status reports, right? But that's not the main job of a TPM. It felt like it because it becomes very sort of busy work where you're doing something. And I feel like because of AI and generative AI specifically, AI has been around for a long time, all those mundane tasks that come with the job that not everybody necessarily enjoys. Like, I've never heard anybody say, I enjoy taking notes. that can be delegated to
Yeah.
it, right? And
Right.
you now have the time to do other work that helps you establish your brand, helps you scale so that you can manage bigger and more complex programs. So that could mean I need to know what risks and dependencies. And so if you get bogged down into the weeds, then you don't have time to do that. Now you do. You can go take the time to build relationships with your stakeholders, which is something that is never prioritized. Now you can do that, right? You can create better material, more insightful things, because some of the data is being collected automatically, but now you can add your thinking on top of it. So you're not just busy trying to collect the data. You are now thinking about what does this data mean for whom? So those are the things that I feel like really add value and showcase the real value of the role. It was always there. It was just for some people, it was hard to find the time to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then to answer your for me personally, and since it's very interesting timing because in 2022 is when I started working on my own, and like at the end of 2022 is when ChatGPT came along, and it has really helped me as a solo entrepreneur to scale myself. So I don't just have TPM Academy, which is the career development platform for aspiring and current technical program managers, but I also run a business as an executive leadership coach where I work with tech leaders, startup founders. Sometimes I also have TPMs who I coach, and I also work as a consultant with organizations who might be interested in establishing a TPM organization or streamlining their execution or even operational efficiency. And I'm only able to do all of these things mostly on my own, sometimes with help from part-time folks because of AI.
Everyone has heard about your book, or at least for the people who are following the TPM Academy and who are following you on LinkedIn, about your book called The Art of Strategic Execution. Could you tell us more about your book and what led you to write a book about that?
So The Art of Strategic Execution is a book focused on, once again, technical program managers to help them find success in that career. And it's geared towards everybody from somebody who's aspiring and just thinking about transitioning to the role, to somebody who's been in the role and wants to advance their career, or somebody who might be even stepping into TPM people management. So I really tried to cover the arc of a TPM's career, reflecting on my own journey through a decade plus of being in that position. And once again, it was a way to get out my experience, my stories, to share, what goes beyond the technical aspects. So I know the technical is a really important aspect of being a strong TPM, and it almost forms the foundation of the role. But being only technical is not going to be enough, is what I learned through my experience. And so I wanted to share what goes in the art, not just the science of being the TPM. And so getting this book out there and just something I wanted to do, right? Write a book and sort of hold something that's more physical than having a blog or having a website. But based on, my conversations, I interviewed a few TPM leaders for the book and, others who have read the book. It's something that it's not necessarily formulaic, but people is like, this is something we haven't thought about. Or even where folks who are not TPMs read through it, one is they get a better understanding of the role. But there are also many lessons in there that aren't just for TPMs. Somebody who was actually reviewing my book, mostly like proofreading, they were in a completely separate world, but somewhat of a similar profile of being a program manager, not in tech. It's like, but this is still resonates with me so much. So in some ways, I wrote the book for TPMs, but there is other audiences that also benefit from it.
So what does that mean, though? What are some of the strategies that a TPM would have to know? Could you deep diver into that so we can get a perspective of the strategic thinking that a TPM would need in an org?
Yeah.
Or in any company?
Correct. So when I talk about tactical versus strategic thinking, this is something I talk a lot in the book. And what does strategic thinking mean? What does strategic execution mean, right? When we think of execution most of the time, it's a very short-term thinking. Like here, I need to do this. I need to build a task list. I need to figure out which tool I'm going to use to track these tasks. Those are all means to an end. Thinking about the end all the time is, in my world, strategic thinking. So you're always thinking about the long term. When you're thinking about launching a particular program, you're not just thinking about only the features. You're thinking, okay, who do I need to talk to? How will I keep tab on everything? What does my role mean here? How do I get work done from others even though they are not reporting into me? How do I scale myself? So tactical could be tasks and tools and things like that. Strategic would be dependencies, risks, stakeholder management, understanding what my stakeholders want. How do I influence them? Though that's kind of the difference I see. And it really becomes a lot about how can you do more with a very finite amount of time you have on your hands.
Got it. Yeah, that's very helpful, Priyanka. Thank you for that. I guess another question from that is how would we, you know, from applying and learning from different books and coaching and other methods of learning, how do we actually develop that mindset to apply that onto our day-to-day jobs? So it's one thing about always like consuming all of this information, and then at the end, it's actually applying it. So what are your tips and tricks of, developing that whole mindset towards TPMing?
Yeah, I'm going to sort of share this with you, and it doesn't just apply to TPM. I think it's sort of, as a coach, as a leadership coach, I also see a lot of times where people come in and it's not that they lack the leadership skills, it's they lack the mindset or that they're afraid to do something. So even as a TPM, this applies to them for sure, is, sometimes simple example, like you might know something, but you don't speak up in a meeting. So how do
And
you
then it's
come
either
across?
they think they're going to say something horrible or they're worried about saying something wrong.
Yes, exactly. That is like the most common things I hear. Like, what if they think my idea is stupid? Or what if they think like,
Yeah.
oh, why does this person not know this? Why are they asking this question, right?
Yeah.
Very common with a lot of people. But doing something like that establishes, your idea may not be perfect, which is fine. But you said something, it might spark another discussion. It might lead the discussion in. And so when you're able to, you're not just consuming information as a TPM, oh, what are the dates? What is the status things? But you're actually sharing your ideas, your insights. People see you as somebody who's there also contributing, right? And so now that becomes a very important step. It's a slightly implicit step of becoming a very strong or a more sought after TPM, right? But it's there. So that's the kind of thing. So now I can teach you that as a leader, here's a leadership skill you have, ABC, right? But if you don't put it into practice, then it doesn't stick. So when we think about mindset shift, there is, I would say, 2 or 3 things that you can do. The first thing is awareness. You need to know what you're not doing or what you need to do. See, if you don't know how to be a strong TPM, you can read a lot of articles. That's how you build awareness. That's why the website is there, right? That's why the course is
Right.
there.
Yeah.
Now, once you have the awareness, that's where the application comes in. So it's like finding very specific things on like, I'm going to do this here, right? I'm going to make an intentional effort to apply what I learned here into this situation. And sometimes you need prep work for that. So you do that prep work. And then the third thing is getting over your inhibitions to do something. So you have the intention, but you still have the inhibition. And so you have to get past it. And that's sometimes the most difficult, but you will find that when you get to do it once, it will be very difficult. Then you do it again, it will be slightly easier. And so the more you do it, you develop the muscle memory for doing hard things, and that gets easy. And then there are other hard things that will come along, but that's how you continue to change your mindset.
Nice. Yeah. So I guess if you could give one piece of advice to our listeners who want to level up, like personally and professionally, what would that be?
I would say 2 things, right? They kind of go hand in hand. One is communication. So communication is really important. Being able to tell your story, being able to get your point across. That becomes more and more important, and especially more verbal. and in-person communication. Sometimes it can be virtual too. Why? Because again, AI can write things now, like AI can help you write things. It can also help you communicate better. But there will be your own nuance that comes in, your own voice that comes in. So when you develop that, that's how you differentiate with other AI generated stuff. And then the second thing that does go hand in hand, especially with career development, it's not just about upskilling, is building your network, your relationships, like forming those relationships with as many people as you can. That becomes really important because it is a lot about who you're connected with. You never know who might open up doors for you or who you can help. So building that sort of connection with other people can be really helpful, especially again, if we work a lot remotely, we are working virtually, we are talking to AI a lot. We also need more human interaction.
So what are some ways that we can effectively network with people? What are some mediums that people can take a look at to build that network for themselves?
Yeah. You can do it multiple ways. The one thing I want to clarify is I think sometimes it feels very resistive with the word networking, right? And it's again one of those things you have to get comfortable with. You have to get comfortable with networking. I can tell you, like, I'm an introvert. I don't do well necessarily in large crowds. But I try to overcome that uncomfortableness that comes with it. And so you have to do that if you don't like the word networking or if you don't know how is it going to feel. The
And
other
that's
thing,
really funny because you were a technical program manager leading many teams, and you're saying that you're an introvert. So it's very hard to do people management when you're introverted, right?
yes, and again, sometimes you can think of introversion as slightly different than how we think of it normally. Like, I'm not somebody who's like sit quietly, never talk, kind of an introvert. Also, there's various flavors for it, and I think we could all talk about introvert, extrovert for a long time, but without going into all that, I would say, yeah, I do feel like I need my time to energize, is how I see introversion. And at the same time, it's been years. If you met me when I was 20, I would not be as, talking the same way I do now. So that's what I mean. Like, you do evolve over time, but I still consider myself as somebody who, like, I'm comfortable with myself, but I can go talk to people now because I've tried to get over it. And it's still, you still need to do it. But coming back to your point about how do you continue to network, right? You have to put yourself out there. So go to meetings, meet people. There are virtual coffee meetups, there are in-person meetups. Whoever you have some commonality with it. It could be they are a TPM. It could be that they are in tech. It could be that they like, I don't know, the same movie as you do. Just going to make things up here now. And so what I mean is, it doesn't have to be professional networking. You don't have to go to a conference always or things like that. Those are all good avenues too. But your network can also be like a art class that you might join because you do art, right? Or an improv class that you might join. You are going into that not with the intention of networking. You're going there to form connections. And so I would say that thinking of networking as just going in and forming connections, as opposed to, I need this person in my life because I need in the future for them to do something for me, is what creates the discomfort around networking. So if you take away that and think about networking as just, I'm just going to go talk to people, it makes it easier on you. Don't set expectations, but always be listening, always be asking questions, be curious in those information. Well,
Where do you see the biggest opportunity for transformational leadership in the next 5 to 10 years from now, especially like in tech and with the rapidly changing industries?
wow. Yeah. This is a big question because there's so much change that has happened in the past 5 years, like in terms of how companies are operating, how they view leadership, how they view some of the things that were promoted as being strong leaders are also now being sort of taken away because of business interests. And so with AI and what's happening, I always think like the pendulum always swings from one end to the other all the time. And so if we think about longer term, I think it will come back to where we do care about human connection. Because when we think about strong leadership, it is, yes, transformational leadership is about getting results, but it is also about doing things in a way that feel authentic and that support people, not necessarily just, take advantage of them. So I feel like with AI being able to do a lot of things, people will be able to showcase more of their other skill set. Their skill sets will elevate. And what the leadership will look like is how can now you work in a hybrid teams of AI agents and people, and how do you continue to elevate and differentiate the human aspect, team itself, or whatever group you're leading.
Yeah, I think definitely human connection is one of the things that a lot of companies and teams will be striving towards because everything is AI and technology. And I think human connection is definitely very important at this point. So, how do you define success now compared to when you first started? And has that definition changed as you've evolved?
Yes, definitely. I think earlier, I don't even know if like when I was 20, what I was thinking, really defining success in my head. Because sometimes here's the thing that happens. You don't define success for you. I think others define it for you when you're younger. So if you're a child, it's like, if you get this, or if you get into this field, or if you get this rank or percentage or grade or whatever, right? That is success. So I think earlier when you're younger, others define success for you. And I think as you learn to, with experience, with your real life scenarios, you then develop that definition yourself. So earlier, what I thought was success was, okay, you continue to have a job, you get a degree, have a job, continue to rise up the ladder. That's your typical thing of success. Like you earn a certain amount of money. I don't know. Then with that money comes other things like, a house or other things, right? And now it's a lot about being able to do what I believe in. So is that, how do I want to show up in the world? What difference or impact do I want to make? Can I achieve that? It doesn't have to be a specific title or a specific company or anything like that. It is more about what can I do that helps me feel authentic while achieving my dreams. So it doesn't mean you're any less ambitious. It just means that you define that success terms on your own, whatever that might be.
Thank you so much, Priyanka, for joining me on the podcast. It was great to having you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I love being here, and I hope that your podcast continues to sort of grow and be successful.